The child's voice carried through the darkness of space like a ghost, soft, fragile, a melody in a language no human had heard sung with tenderness in over 70 years. The kind of lullaby a mother teaches her daughter on quiet nights when the universe feels small and safe and the monsters stay outside where they belong. But there were no safe nights on RT7 anymore. The recording crackled with interference, static from a dying
The
transmitter.
situation is critical.
Background
We
sounds
must act
that
now.
didn't belong in any
Time is now
lullaby
out. We have to
machines,
stop it.
beeping their urgent rhythms. The wet rasp of labored breathing, someone coughing in a way that suggested they'd been coughing for months. Then the child stopped singing. A woman's voice replaced the melody, older, exhausted beyond measure, speaking in the clipped, careful English of someone who'd learned the language from textbooks rather than conversations. This is Administrator Sarana Tal of Colony RT7, Christian Outer Territories. Day 87 of the outbreak. Pause. The kind of silence that comes when someone is gathering strength to say words they never imagined having to speak. 30,000 dead, 170,000 remaining, mortality rate 89%, respiratory failure followed by cascade organ shutdown. We have no remaining antivirals, no viable treatment protocols, no supply ships, no reinforcements. Another pause. Longer. In the background, the child began humming the same lullaby, but quieter now, as if singing to herself in the darkness. The Empire declared us quarantined 73 days ago. They cut our communications grid. They withdrew the medical teams. They told us to wait for containment protocols. We're not waiting anymore. We're dying. The woman's voice cracked. Just once. Just enough to reveal the mother beneath the administrator. If anyone receives this transmission, if anyone out there is listening, we have children, so many children. They deserve more than this. If you can help, if you have mercy, please. The transmission cut to static. Then nothing. Just the endless silence of space, indifferent to the pleas of the dying. Captain Aldrich Hayes sat in the dim light of his ready room aboard the United Earthship Covenant and listened to the recording a second time, then a third. The child's voice got him every time. That particular softness. The way she hummed when her mother was speaking, as if music could somehow push back against the horror of her reality. Aldrich was 48 years old. He'd spent 26 of those years in uniform. Earth Defense Fleet, Border Patrol, peacekeeping operations, 3 combat deployments during the Frontier Wars, 2 decorations for valor, 1 for disobeying orders that would have gotten his entire crew killed. He had the kind of face that suggested he smiled rarely and meant it even less often. Sharp features worn down by decades of recycled air and artificial gravity. Gray creeping into his dark hair at the temples. Eyes that had seen too many things he couldn't forget no matter how hard he tried. The ready room was small, efficient, a desk with 2 screens, a bunk that never got used, photos on the wall that he'd brought from Earth 20 years ago and couldn't quite bring himself to take down. One photo showed a boy, maybe 10 years old, dark hair like his father's, a gap-toothed smile that suggested he'd just heard the best joke in the world and couldn't wait to share it. Ethan, 20 years gone, 20 years since the siege of Nova Station, when Krydian raiders had punched through Earth's outer defenses and turned a mining colony into a graveyard. 17,000 dead, Aldrich's son among them. His wife, 2 years later, after grief had eaten through her like a slow poison, she refused to fight. The fleet had asked him if he wanted compassionate leave, time to process, time to heal. He'd requested reassignment to Border Patrol instead. 427 days he'd been out here now, 14 months, 9,000 hours, watching the line between human space and Cretan territory, making sure the peace held, making sure the war everyone expected didn't start by accident or stupidity or the kind of hatred that makes men do terrible things. Not one shot fired in 427 days. Not one diplomatic incident. Not 1 inch of territory yielded or claimed. Just the long, patient work of keeping 2 species from killing each other day after day after day, while the politicians argued about borders and the families on both sides tried to remember what normal felt like. Aldrich hit replay again. The child's voice filled his ready room once more. That lullaby in a language he didn't understand, carrying emotions he knew too well. His desk console beeped, a soft chime indicating someone was requesting permission to enter. He glanced at the security feed. Lieutenant Commander Kessler Rains stood outside waiting with the kind of patience that suggested he'd been there for several minutes already. Aldrich pressed the release. The door hissed open. Kessler stepped inside, 32 years old, sharp mind, sharper instincts, the kind of officer who'd made commander before most of his academy classmates had figured out which end of a starship was which. Efficient, competent, loyal to a fault, also apparently keeping secrets. "You've heard the transmission," Aldrich said. "Not a question." "Yes, sir. Communications picked it up 3 hours ago. Automated distress beacon. Christian origin, broadcasting on emergency frequencies." 3 hours, and you waited until now to bring it to my attention. Kessler's expression didn't change. "I needed to verify the source, confirm it wasn't a trap or a false flag operation, and I needed to check something in the classified archives before I spoke with you." "What kind of something?" Kessler reached into his jacket and pulled out a data chip. "Not standard fleet issue. The kind of hardware you used when you wanted to keep information completely off the grid." He set it on Aldrich's desk. "Sir, what I'm about to show you is classified at the highest levels. Eyes-only clearance. Most admirals don't know this exists. I only know because my real assignment aboard Covenant isn't as your executive officer." Aldrich leaned back in his chair. "I'm listening." "I'm intelligence, sir. Embedded. My actual rank is Major Fleet Intelligence Division. I've been with you for 14 months as part of a monitoring operation." "Not monitoring you," Kessler added quickly. "Monitoring the situation. Waiting for a specific set of conditions to occur. Conditions like a Critian colony calling for help." "Exactly like that." Aldrich picked up the data chip, turned it over in his fingers. "How long have you known about RT-7? "Since the outbreak started, 87 days ago. Intelligence has been tracking it. The plague, the quarantine, the Empire's decision to abandon the colony rather than commit resources to saving it." Something cold settled in Aldrich's chest. 87 days, and Fleet Command did nothing. Fleet Command doesn't know. This is above their clearance level. "Then who does know?" Kessler met his gaze. "You're about to find out, sir, but I need to ask you something first. That photo on your wall, your son. If you'd known 20 years ago that someone had the resources to save Nova Station but chose not to deploy them, what would you have done?" Aldrich's jaw tightened. "That's a dangerous question, Commander." "I know, sir, but I need your answer." Silence stretched between them. Outside the ready room, Covenant hummed with the normal sounds of a ship at station keeping. Crew going about their duties. Systems monitoring the empty space between human and Christian territory. Everything normal. Everything routine. Everything about to change. "I would have saved them anyway," Aldrich said quietly. "I would have done whatever it took. Orders be damned." Kessler nodded slowly. "That's what I thought. That's what we hoped. Insert the chip, sir. It's time you learned about Shepard Protocol." The file opened with a date June 15th, 2163, 42 years ago. A video feed resolved on the screen. An older man in an admiral's uniform, white hair, weathered face, eyes that had seen too much war and made peace with it anyway. Aldrich recognized him immediately, even though he'd been dead for 5 years. Admiral Thomas Garrett, the man who trained Aldrich, mentored him, shaped him from an angry young officer with a chip on his shoulder into someone who understood that command meant more than giving orders. It meant making choices no one else wanted to make and living with the consequences. Garrett's recorded image looked directly into the camera, directly at Aldrich across 4 decades of silence. "If you're watching this," Garrett said, "then something I hoped would never happen has occurred. The Christian Empire has abandoned one of their colonies, left their own people to die because the cost of saving them exceeded their willingness to pay. And someone, probably intelligence, has determined that you're the right person to do something about it." Garrett paused, seemed to consider his next words carefully. "I'm going to tell you a story. In 2016, Fleet Intelligence intercepted a classified Critian communication. High Command discussing what they called acceptable losses in the outer territories. They were running cost-benefit analyses on their own colonies, determining which ones were worth defending and which ones could be sacrificed if circumstances required." On screen, Garrett's expression hardened. It was cold, clinical, the kind of mathematics that treats people like numbers in a ledger. They identified 17 colonies as expendable, minimal strategic value, minimal economic output, mostly civilians, lots of families, lots of children. Garrett leaned forward slightly. "I knew right then that someday the Empire would follow through. Someday there'd be a crisis, plague, famine, environmental collapse, and they'd make the calculation, save these people or write them off, and they'd choose the ledger." The Admiral's hands clasped in front of him. "So I made a different choice. I initiated what I'm calling Shepherd Protocol, a program to prepare for the day when Critian civilians would need help and their own government wouldn't provide it. We couldn't be obvious. Couldn't let Earth Command know because they'd shut it down for political reasons. Couldn't let the Christians know because they'd see it as a pretext for war. Garrett's eyes seemed to bore through the screen. For 42 years, we prepared. We stockpiled medical supplies on every border station and patrol ship. We trained teams in Critian biology, Critian language, Critian medical protocols. We developed broad-spectrum antivirals that could adapt to their physiology. We ran drills disguised as standard exercises. We built relationships with Christian scientists who shared our values. A slight smile crossed the Admiral's face. We created a shadow humanitarian organization inside the fleet, hidden in plain sight, waiting, ready, for the day when someone would call for help and no one would answer. The smile faded. Except us. We would answer, because that's who we are. That's who we choose to be. Not conquerors, not avengers, shepherds, looking after those who have no one else. Garrett stood up, straightened his uniform. If you're watching this, Captain, then you face an impossible choice. Cross into Critian space without authorization. Violate every treaty and regulation. Risk your career, your crew, your life. All to save people who officially are still our enemy. He stepped closer to the camera. Or you can follow orders. Report the situation through proper channels. Let the bureaucrats debate and the politicians posture while children die and history judges us for what we failed to do. Garrett's voice dropped lower, softer. I know which choice I'd make. I know which choice the man I trained you to be would make. Shepherd Protocol is yours now. All the resources, all the planning, all the faith I placed in the idea that humanity's greatest strength isn't our weapons or our ships or our technology. He placed one hand over his heart. It's our refusal to abandon hope, even for strangers, even for enemies, even when it costs us everything. The recording ended. Aldrich sat in silence for a long moment. Then he looked at Kessler. How many ships are part of this protocol? Every border patrol vessel, 43 in total, all with the same embedded supplies, the same trained personnel, the same sealed orders waiting for activation. And if I activate them, then we cross that border, we save RT-7, and we deal with the consequences. Court-martial, possibly treason charges. Possibly, sir. Aldrich looked at Ethan's photo again. That gap-toothed smile. That trust that fathers could protect their children from the monsters. 20 years too late for his son. Not too late for someone else's daughter. The child in the transmission, Aldrich said. Do we have a name? Kessler pulled up a file. Kira Vore, 8 years old. Daughter of Administrator Sarana Tall. Status infected. Condition critical but stable. Estimated survival time without intervention, 72 hours. 72 hours, 3 days. Aldrich stood up. Straightened his uniform, made the decision that Admiral Garrett had trained him to make 42 years before he'd ever sat in this chair. Sound general quarters, all senior staff to the bridge in 10 minutes. And Kessler, sir, when this is over and they're deciding what to do with us, make sure they know this was my decision. My order. The crew was following their captain. Nothing more. Kessler's expression didn't change. With respect, sir, I don't think anyone will believe that, but I appreciate the gesture. The bridge of UES Covenant was a study in controlled efficiency, 40 personnel at their stations, screens displaying everything from weapons status to atmospheric recycling. The gentle hum of systems that kept 300 souls alive in the hostile vacuum of space. Everything running smoothly. Everything normal. Until their captain walked in and ended normal forever. Aldrich took his position in the command chair, looked around at faces he'd served with for 14 months. Good people. Competent. Professional. About to follow him into a situation that might get them all killed. He owed them honesty. 42 minutes ago, Aldrich began, we received a distress call from Critian Colony RT-7, 18 light-years inside Critian territory, population approximately 170,000. They're experiencing a plague outbreak with an 89% mortality rate. The Critian Empire has quarantined the colony and withdrawn all support. They're leaving their own people to take. Murmurs around the bridge, shock, disgust, the universal human reaction to cruelty disguised as practicality. RT-7 is calling for help. They're calling for anyone who'll listen. As far as I can determine, we're the only ones who answered. Aldrich stood. Walk to the main view screen where the border between human and Krydian space showed as a thin line overlaid on the starfield. Arbitrary, invisible except on maps and in mines. I'm about to give you an order that violates our standing rules of engagement, violates the Arcturus Treaty, possibly constitutes an act of war. I'm ordering Covenant to cross into Krydian territory, proceed to RT-7, and render humanitarian assistance. The bridge went absolutely silent. This is my decision, my responsibility. Any crew member who wishes to transfer to another vessel before we depart has 5 minutes to make that request. No questions asked, no judgment rendered. Your careers will not be affected. He looked at each station, each face. But if you stay, if you choose to cross that line with me, I can't promise you'll come home. I can't promise the fleet won't prosecute. I can't promise anything except that we'll do our best to save people who need help. That's all I have to offer, your duty or your conscience. You get to choose. Aldrich checked the chronometer. You have 5 minutes. Dismissed. He walked to the ready room, closed the door, stood there in the darkness, waiting to see how many of his crew would abandon ship before he took them all into the fire. The minutes crawled past. 3 minutes. 4. 5. His console chimed. A message from the personnel officer. Transfer request 0. Aldrich felt something tight in his chest loosen just slightly. He opened the door, returned to the bridge. Every station was manned, every crew member at their post. Waiting. Lieutenant Sarah Vickers, the helmsman, spoke without looking away from her controls. Course to RT-7 plotted and ready, Captain. Estimated transit time at maximum sustainable speed, 14 hours, 20 minutes. Commander Thorne Madsen, chief engineer, a man of 55 who'd seen more wars than most officers half his age. Engineering reports ready for emergency power. We've been running drills for this scenario for years, sir. Didn't know what we were drilling for, but we're ready. Dr. Mira Strand, chief medical officer, her voice carrying the calm certainty of someone who'd made peace with impossible odds long ago. Medical bay is prepared. We have supplies and protocols for Krydian biology. I have 16 personnel trained in xenomedicine standing by. One by one, the department heads reported ready. Aldrich returned to his command chair, sat down, looked at the view screen one more time. Helm, he said quietly, take us across. Aye, Captain. Crossing the DMZ in 3, 2, 1. The Covenant's engines flared brilliant blue in the darkness. The ship turned from its patrol pattern and accelerated toward the invisible line that separated peace from potential war. Alarms screamed on every monitoring station within 300,000 kilometers. Human ships watched in shock as one of their own broke formation. Krydian vessels scrambled to intercept. And Captain Aldrich Hayes, 48 years old, 26 years in service, commander of a ship that had just committed what every treaty called an act of aggression, sat calmly in his chair and thought about a little girl named Kira who had 72 hours left to live. Unless he could reach her first. Behind them, the border alarms faded into the distance. Ahead of them, Krydian space loomed dark and hostile, and full of ships that wouldn't hesitate to destroy an invader. Shields up, Aldrich ordered. Weapons remain cold. We fire only in self-defense and only to disable. We're not here to fight. We're here to save lives. Aye, sir, Weapons Officer Garrett acknowledged. Kessler moved to stand beside the captain's chair, spoke quietly so only Aldrich could hear. Admiral Garrett would be proud, sir. Aldrich didn't look away from the view screen. Admiral Garrett is dead. He doesn't have to live with the consequences. Neither did he have to start this protocol 42 years ago, but he did it anyway because it was right. Right doesn't win wars, Commander. No, sir, but it defines who we are when the wars are over. 300,000 kilometers behind Covenant, on the human side of the border, Admiral Victoria Hayes, no relation to Aldrich, despite the shared surname, stared at her tactical display in something approaching disbelief. Tell me I'm not seeing this, she said to her operations officer. Tell me one of our battle cruisers did not just cross into Krydian territory without authorization. I wish I could, Admiral. UES Covenant registration number, AD F7743, crossed the DMZ 3 minutes ago. Current heading suggests they're en route to the Krydian outer territories. Get me Captain Hayes on comms, now. We've been trying, ma'am. He's not responding to any hails. Admiral Hayes, 55 years old, 30 years in the fleet, currently responsible for preventing exactly this kind of disaster, closed her eyes and tried to remember why she'd ever thought Border Patrol was a quiet assignment. Contact Earth Command, Priority Alpha. Tell them we have a rogue vessel situation. Then get me the Krydian diplomatic mission. We need damage control before this turns into a shooting war. Yes, Admiral. She looked at the display again, one small dot moving deeper into hostile territory. Captain Aldrich Hayes. She'd read his file. Exemplary service record. Lost his family to Krydian raiders. Never complained, never caused problems. Until today. "What are you doing, Captain?" she whispered to the screen. "What could possibly be worth starting a war?" The dot continued its journey into the dark, and Admiral Hayes began composing the most difficult report of her career, explaining to Earth Command how one of their ships had just invaded enemy territory, and she had no idea why. On the Christian side of the border aboard the Imperial Dreadnought, Valorous Resolve Admiral Vorenth Kane received a report that made him set down his evening meal and question whether the universe had decided to test his patience one final time before retirement. "A human battlecruiser," he repeated slowly, "has crossed into our territory." "Yes, Admiral," his tactical officer confirmed. "UES Covenant. Designation appears to be a heavy patrol cruiser. 300 souls aboard. Entered our space 4 minutes ago. Current course suggests they're heading toward the outer colonies." Vorenth was 62 years old by Christian reckoning. Tall and thin like all his species, with gray skin that had darkened with age and large black eyes that could express contempt in ways humans found unnerving. He'd spent 40 years in the Imperial fleet, fought in 3 wars against human expansion, lost friends, lost ships, lost faith in the idea that peace between their species would ever be more than a temporary pause between conflicts. And now this. Have they fired weapons? Negative, Admiral. Shields active, but weapons remain cold. They're not responding to hail attempts. One ship, Vorenth mused, not a fleet, not a coordinated attack. One ship breaking their formation and crossing the line. He pulled up the navigational data, traced the projected course. His eyes narrowed. They're heading toward RT-7. The tactical officer checked his data. Confirmed, Admiral. Current trajectory puts them in RT-7 orbital space in approximately 14 hours. RT-7. The colony they'd quarantined 11 weeks ago. The plague outbreak that High Command had decided was too expensive to contain. The 200,000 souls they'd written off as acceptable losses in the name of fiscal responsibility. The secret shame that Vorenth carried in the dark hours when he couldn't sleep, and his conscience wouldn't grant him peace. "Why?" he said aloud. "Why would humans go to RT-7? There's nothing there but death and dying." His communications officer spoke hesitantly. "Admiral, we've detected unauthorized transmissions from RT-7 over the past 3 months. Distress calls on emergency frequencies. It's possible the humans intercepted one. And they're responding to a Christian colony in distress." "It would appear so, sir." Vorenth sat back in his command chair, thought about the war he'd fought, the humans he'd killed, the ships he'd destroyed, all in the name of defending the Empire from an aggressive species that threatened their way of life. And now that species was rushing toward a colony the Empire itself had abandoned. To help. "Orders from High Command," he asked. "Destroy the human vessel, Admiral. No exceptions. The quarantine of RT-7 must be maintained. High Command is 3 weeks' travel from here. We're the ones on the border. We're the ones who have to make the decision." His tactical officer looked uncomfortable. "Sir, our orders are clear." "Clear," Vorenth agreed. "Not necessarily right." He stood, walked to the view screen where the distant speck of the human ship showed as a highlighted marker on the tactical overlay. "Ready the 3rd Interceptor Squadron. 15 ships, fast pursuit. I want them to overtake that human cruiser before it reaches RT-7. And their rules of engagement," Admiral Vorenth was quiet for a long moment. "Pursuit only, no firing unless the human vessel attacks first. I want to see what they do. I want to understand why they're going to a dying colony when their own fleet is screaming at them to turn around." "Well, sir, if High Command learns we didn't immediately destroy them, then High Command can come out here and do it themselves," Vorenth interrupted. "I've spent 40 years fighting humans. I think I've earned the right to be curious about why one of their ships is doing something that makes absolutely no sense." He turned to his crew. "Launch the interceptors and send a message to the rest of the fleet. All ships maintain alert status. If this is some kind of elaborate trick, we'll be ready, but we don't start firing until we know what we're dealing with." "Aye, Admiral." Vorenth returned to his chair. Watch the human ship continue its journey deeper into Krydian space, toward RT-7, toward a colony of dying civilians that Vorenth's own government had condemned to death. "What are you doing, human captain?" he murmured. "What could possibly be worth invading our territory?" The same question Admiral Victoria Hayes had asked 300,000 kilometers away. Neither would get their answer for another 14 hours, but the answer when it came would change everything. In the medical bay of Colony RT, 8-year-old Kira Vore lay in a bed surrounded by machines that beeped their steady rhythms and breathed for her when her own lungs forgot how. Her mother sat beside her, had sat beside her for 6 days straight. Administrator Sarana Tal, responsible for 170,000 souls, unable to save the one that mattered most. Sing again, little star, Sarana whispered in their native tongue. Please. Kira's eyes fluttered open, dark eyes in a face too pale, too thin, 8 years old and already learning what it meant to die. The lullaby. Kira's voice was barely audible over the machines. Yes, the one your grandmother taught you. Kira tried to sit up, couldn't quite manage it. Her mother helped her gentle hands supporting thin shoulders. And in a voice that shook but never wavered, Kira sang, the ancient melody of their people. The song that mothers had sung to children for 10,000 years. The promise that someone was watching. Someone was listening. Someone cared. Sarana closed her eyes and prayed to God she'd stopped believing in 70 days ago. Prayed that the transmission had reached someone. Prayed that someone was coming. Prayed that her daughter would live to see another sunrise. In the darkness of space 14 hours away, Captain Aldrich Hayes listened to a recording of that same lullaby and pushed his ship faster than regulations allowed, racing against time, racing against death, racing to prove that Admiral Garrett had been right 42 years ago when he'd bet everything on a simple idea, that humanity's greatest strength was knowing when to break the rules to do what was right. The Covenant flew through the night. Behind it, 2 fleets mobilized for possible war. Ahead of it, a dying colony waited for a miracle they'd stopped believing in. And at the center of it all, one captain who'd lost his son 20 years ago carried the hope that someone else's daughter might live to see tomorrow. The line between human and Cretan space faded into memory. The point of no return disappeared in the darkness. There was only the mission now, only the promise, only the desperate race to reach one little girl before her voice faded into silence forever. 14 hours to RT-7, 72 hours before Kira's time ran out. The math was simple. The stakes were everything. And Captain Aldrich Hayes, 48 years old, 26 years in service, commander of a ship that had just committed an act that could start a war or end one, sat in his chair and watched the chronometer count down. Every second mattered. Every minute brought them closer. Every hour was a gift or a sentence, depending on what waited at the end. The Covenant raced on through the darkness. Shepard Protocol was active. And 42 years of preparation came down to one question. Would they arrive in time? The interceptors came like silver daggers through the dark. 15 Christian warships, each one built for speed and firepower, their hulls gleaming with that distinctive crimson alloy that looked like dried blood in the starlight. They moved in perfect formation, closing the distance to Covenant with predatory precision. Aldrich watched them approach on the tactical display. 12 hours into their 14-hour journey to RT-7, 2 hours from their destination, 2 hours from the moment when words would either save lives or start a war. Range, he asked quietly, 60,000 kilometers and closing, Lieutenant Vickers reported from helm. Their weapons are hot, targeting sensors active. They're preparing to engage. Our weapons status? Cold, sir, as ordered. Around the bridge, the crew worked with focused intensity. No panic, no hesitation. They'd trained for combat situations hundreds of times, but this was different. This time they'd been ordered not to fight back. Trust in their captain's judgment or trust in their training. They were choosing him. Kessler stood at his station monitoring communications. Admiral Voranth is hailing us, sir. He's demanding we power down and prepare to be boarded. Put him through. Visual. The main view screen flickered. The tactical overlay disappeared, replaced by the bridge of a Critian dreadnought. And standing at its center, tall and severe, in his dark uniform, Admiral Voranth Kane. This was the first time Aldrich had seen a Critian face-to-face in 20 years. Not since the war. Not since the raids that had taken Ethan. Voranth's gray skin seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. His black eyes held no readable emotion. When he spoke, his voice carried the precise diction of someone who'd learned English as a military necessity rather than a cultural curiosity. Human vessel Covenant, you have violated Christian sovereign space. This constitutes an act of war under the Arcturus Treaty. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. You have 3 minutes to comply. Aldrich stood, walked closer to the view screen, met those alien eyes with the calm certainty of a man who'd already made his choice and accepted the consequences. Admiral Voranth, I'm Captain Aldrich Hayes, United Earthship Covenant. We've received a distress call from Colony RT-7. We're responding with humanitarian assistance. We have medical supplies, trained personnel, and treatment protocols. We're not here to fight. We're here to help your people. Voronth's expression didn't change. RT-7 is under Imperial quarantine. No vessels are permitted to approach. This includes yours. Your people are dying. Children are dying. We can help them. Your offer is noted and rejected. You will power down immediately or my ships will disable you by force. Aldrich glanced at the tactical display. 15 interceptors now in weapons range. Covenant could potentially fight them off. The battle cruiser had superior shields and firepower, but that would mean casualties. Human and Christian blood then spilled over, a misunderstanding that should never escalate to violence. Admiral, I'm going to be direct with you. We're not turning around. We're not powering down. We're going to RT-7 because people asked for help and we answered. You can destroy us if you want, but if you do, 170,000 Christian civilians will die because we won't be there to save them. He stepped closer to the view screen. Is that the decision you want to make? Is that the officer you want to be? Voronth was silent for a long moment. In the background of his bridge, Aldrich could see Critian officers watching their admiral. Waiting for orders? Weapons ready. You speak of my people with unexpected compassion for a human, especially one whose son died at Critian hands. Aldrich felt something cold settle in his chest. The admiral had done his research, knew exactly who he was dealing with. My son's death doesn't change the fact that children are dying on RT-7 right now. His death doesn't make their lives worth less. If anything, it makes me more determined to save them. Determination is not authorization. You have no legal standing to be here. I have moral standing. That's enough. Voronth's eyes narrowed slightly, the first crack in his expressionless facade. You would risk war for people you've never met, for a species that killed your child. I would risk war to prove that we're better than our worst moments. Both of us. The silence stretched out. 5 seconds, 10, 15. Then Voronth spoke to someone off-screen in Critian, orders that Aldrich's translator couldn't quite catch. The tactical display showed the interceptors adjusting position, spreading out in a new formation, encircling Covenant, not attacking, watching. Voronth has turned back to the screen. You have forced my hand, Captain Hayes. I cannot allow you to proceed without authorization, but I find myself curious about what you intend to do. He paused, seemed to be choosing his words carefully. The 3rd Interceptor Squadron will escort you to RT-7. You will be under constant observation. Any hostile action will result in immediate destruction. You will have 72 hours to demonstrate that your intentions are genuine. If you fail, if this is some elaborate deception, you and your crew will face Imperial justice. It wasn't permission, not quite, but it wasn't destruction either. Understood, Admiral, and thank you. Do not thank me yet, Captain. You may not survive long enough to appreciate my restraint. The transmission cut. Aldrich returned to his command chair. Let out a breath he didn't know he had been holding. Well, Kessler said quietly, that went better than expected. We're not safe yet. Those interceptors are looking for any excuse to fire. Maintain course. Stay professional. And make sure every department head knows we do this by the book. No mistakes, no provocations. Aye, sir. 2 hours to RT-7. 2 hours to prove that Shepard Protocol was more than just good intentions wrapped in classified files. 2 hours to save a little girl who'd run out of time 3 days ago and was living on borrowed moments. Covenant flew on through the darkness, surrounded by warships that could destroy it in seconds, but chose instead to watch and wait. And somewhere ahead on a dying colony, Kiravor took another labored breath and held on. The first shot came without warning. Not from Voronth's interceptors. From somewhere else. A plasma bolt that screamed through space and slammed into Covenant's port deflector shield. The ship shuddered. Alarms screamed. Crew members grabbed their stations to keep from being thrown to the deck. Evasive, Aldrich barked. Where did that come from? Christian vessel, Tactical Officer Reeves shouted over the alarms. Designation unknown. They're not part of the escort squadron. They just appeared on long-range sensors and opened fire. Another bolt. This one caught the starboard shield at an angle, deflecting most of the energy, but sending ripples of overload through the defensive grid. Shield status. Port deflector at 70%. Starboard holding at 85. If they keep this up, the third bolt punched through. Pure luck. A fraction of a second when the shield harmonic cycled and left a gap barely wide enough for the plasma to slip through. It hit Covenant's hull directly, tore through reinforced plating, vented atmosphere in an explosive decompression that sucked debris and air into the vacuum, and killed Dr. Wyatt Miller instantly. He'd been in the medical bay, preparing the xenomedicine protocols, going over the Critian biological data one more time to make sure they had the treatment sequences right. 35 years old, brilliant researcher, kind man, father to a 12-year-old daughter named Emma, who lived with her mother on Earth and wrote him letters every week that he saved in a folder labeled My Reasons. The plasma bolt vaporized him before he even knew the ship had been hit. Medical bay has been breached, someone shouted. We've got decompression on deck 7. Emergency bulkheads engaging. Aldrich was already moving. Seal that section. Search and rescue teams deploy immediately. I want a casualty report in 30 seconds. The ship shook again. Another hit. But this time Covenant's shields held. And this time the Critian interceptors returned fire. Not at Covenant. At the rogue vessel that had attacked it. Aldrich watched on the tactical display as Varenth's squadron unleashed a coordinated barrage. 15 ships firing in perfect synchronization. The attacking vessel tried to evade, failed, and took critical damage to its engines. Dead in space. Powerless. Neutralized. The tactical officer's voice was shaken. Sir, the rogue vessel has been disabled. The interceptor squadron is hailing us. Put them through. Varenth appeared on screen again. This time his expression showed something almost like anger. Captain Hayes, that was Captain Drex of the Imperial Guard. He disobeyed direct orders and attacked your vessel. He has been relieved of command and will face court-martial. Do you require assistance? Aldrich's jaw was tight. We have casualties. Medical bay took a direct hit. How many? I don't know yet. Kessler appeared at his side, pale, holding a datapad with the search and rescue report. One name on the casualty list. Dr. Wyatt Miller. Deceased. Aldrich felt something cold and familiar settle into his bones. The same feeling from 20 years ago when they'd told him about Ethan. The same helpless rage at random chance and bad timing and the universe's absolute indifference to whether good people lived or died. He looked at Varenth. One dead. Dr. Miller, he was preparing to save your people. Varenth was silent for a moment. Then he bowed his head slightly, a Critian gesture of respect for the fallen. I am sorry, Captain. This should not have happened. Drex will answer for his actions. Your actions, Aldrich said quietly. You stopped him. You protected us. Why? Because Varenth said slowly, I wanted to see what you would do when you reached R-7. I wanted to understand why a human captain would risk everything for Cretian children. And I wanted to believe that not all humans are the enemy I've spent 40 years fighting. He straightened. You have 72 hours, Captain Hayes. Use them well. And when you save those children, remember that Dr. Miller made it possible. The transmission ended. Aldrich stood there on the bridge surrounded by his crew, feeling the weight of command settle on his shoulders like lead. One casualty, the first blood spilled in Shepard Protocol's 42-year history. A man who dedicated his life to healing, killed by someone who saw enemies instead of opportunity. Sir, Kessler said softly, Dr. Miller has a daughter, Emma. She's 12, lives in Boston with her mother. The same age Ethan had been. Aldrich closed his eyes. Flag his personnel file. When this is over, I'll write to her personally. She deserves to know what her father died for. Yes, sir. How long until we reach RT-7? 97 minutes, sir. 97 minutes to the orbital approach, then atmospheric entry, then landing, then the real work began. Saving 170,000 people with a medical team that had just lost one of its most experienced physicians. All department heads, this is the captain, Aldrich said over the shipwide comm. Dr. Miller gave his life preparing to save the people of RT-7. We're going to make sure his death meant something. We're going to do what we came here to do, and we're going to do it in his memory. That is all. He sat back in his command chair, watched the countdown timer tick toward 0, and thought about a little girl in Boston who would never see her father again because he'd been on a ship that crossed a border to help strangers. The price of mercy paid in blood. But mercy wasn't optional, wasn't negotiable. It was who they were, even when it cost everything. Covenant flew on toward RT-7, 97 minutes to landing, 72 hours to prove they could save a dying colony. And one casualty already on the ledger bought with the life of a good man who'd never fired a shot. The mathematics of compassion written in sacrifice. RT-7 appeared on the view screen like a wound against the stars. A planet that should have been beautiful blues and greens and whites swirling in atmospheric patterns that spoke of life and weather and the normal chaos of a healthy world. Instead, it looked sick. The city showed wrong on the infrared scans. Too many heat signatures clustered in medical facilities. Not enough dispersed through residential areas. The power grid flickered in patterns that suggested failing infrastructure and emergency systems running beyond their design limits. And everywhere on every emergency frequency, distress beacons screaming into the void. 40 Christian warships surrounded the planet in a loose blockade. Vorenth's fleet holding position, watching, waiting to see what the humans would do. "Hail the surface," Aldrich ordered. "Administrator Tal, if she's available." "Channel open, sir." The view screen split, half showing the planet, half showing a woman's face. Sarana Tal looked like she'd aged 20 years in 3 months. Gray skin, pale and sallow, eyes sunken. But when she saw Aldrich, something sparked in those eyes that might have been hope or might have been the last ember of faith before it died completely. "You came," she said in English. Her voice shook. "You actually came." "We came, Administrator. We're here to help. I need landing coordinates for your primary medical facility and a status update on your most critical cases." Sarana's hand went to her mouth. She turned away from the camera for a moment. When she turned back, tears tracked down her face. I thought no one would answer. I thought we'd die here and no one would care." "We care," Aldrich said simply, "and we brought help. Medical supplies, antiviral treatments, trained personnel. We're going to do everything we can." "My daughter, Kira, she's 8. She's in critical condition. I don't know if—" "We'll start with the children, Administrator. Beginning with Kira. I promise you we'll do everything possible." Sarana nodded, couldn't speak. Just transmitted the landing coordinates and stepped back from the camera. Before the transmission ended, Aldrich heard something in the background. A child's voice. Weak, barely audible, singing. That same lullaby from the distress call, the melody that had carried across space and convinced a human captain to violate every regulation to answer. Still singing, still holding on. "Atmospheric entry in 10 minutes, Vickers reported. Landing zone is clear. Local authorities are standing by." Aldrich activated the shipwide comm. "All hands prepare for landing. Medical teams full deployment. Engineering, I want emergency power ready for the surface facilities. Security, establish a perimeter, but remember we're guests here. These people asked for help. We're going to give it to them." He looked at Kessler. "You have the bridge commander. I'm going down with the medical teams." "Sir, protocol suggests the captain remains aboard during—" "Protocol suggested we stay on our side of the border. We're past protocol now." Aldrich stood. "Dr. Strand is in charge of medical operations. But I'm going down there to look those people in the eye and tell them we're here to help. They deserve that much." Kessler nodded. "Understood, sir. Good luck." "We're not relying on luck, Commander. We're relying on 42 years of preparation. Let's hope Admiral Garrett's faith was justified." Covenant settled onto the landing pad with a rumble that shook the ground for half a kilometer in every direction. 300 meters of human warships scarred from the attack engines, still radiating heat from atmospheric entry, sitting in the middle of a Critian colony like a promise made solid. The boarding ramp extended. Aldrich walked down first, flanked by 2 security officers. Behind him, Dr. Mira Strand led a team of 16 medical personnel carrying equipment and supplies. Behind them, engineering crews with power generators and portable medical stations. Sarana Tal waited at the bottom of the ramp. She looked even worse in person than she had on the view screen. Exhausted beyond measure, running on nothing but determination and the desperate hope that these strangers might save her world. She looked up at Aldrich, up at this human in his dark uniform, this captain who'd crossed into hostile territory and risked war to answer a plea for help. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for not abandoning us." Aldrich reached out slowly, carefully, and placed a hand on her shoulder. The first time in 20 years he'd touched a Christian without it being through the scope of a weapon. "We don't abandon people who ask for help," he said. "That's not who we are." Behind Sarana, other Critians gathered. Civilians, medical staff, colony administrators, all of them staring at the humans with expressions that mixed fear and hope and desperate gratitude. Dr. Strand stepped forward. "Administrator Tal, I'm Dr. Mira Strand. I need to see your medical facilities immediately. We have treatment protocols ready to deploy, but I need to assess your current situation first." "This way," Sarana said. "But I should warn you, it's bad. Worse than anything we've dealt with before." They walked across the landing pad toward the main medical complex. As they moved, Aldrich saw the extent of the crisis. Streets too quiet, buildings with darkened windows, the occasional transport vehicle moving with emergency lights flashing. And in the distance, the medical facility, a sprawling complex that should have been handling routine care, but had instead become a death house where people went to die because there was nowhere else to go. The smell hit them before they entered, antiseptic and sickness, and the sweet rot scent of bodies failing, despite every effort to keep them alive. Dr. Strand didn't flinch. She'd worked disaster zones before. Epidemic wards, triage centers where you made the choice of who to save and who to let go because you couldn't save everyone. But Aldrich saw her eyes harden slightly as they entered the main ward. Beds filled with dying Cridians. More patients on the floor because there were no more beds. Machines beeping. People coughing in that wet, desperate way that meant their lungs were failing. Medical staff moving between patients with the exhausted efficiency of people who'd been working without rest for 3 months. A Cridian physician approached. Old, gray-skinned and almost white with age and stress. He looked at the human medical team with an expression Aldrich couldn't quite read. "I am Dr. Valentok," he said in heavily accented English. "Senior medical officer. I apologize for our conditions. We have done our best with limited resources." Dr. Strand stepped forward, extended her hand in the human gesture of greeting. Talk stared at it for a moment, then took it carefully. "Dr. Mira Strand, don't apologize. You've kept these people alive under impossible circumstances. That's extraordinary. Now we're here to help you save them." "The mortality rate is 89%, Talk said. His voice cracked slightly. "I've lost 30,000 patients in 90 days. I've watched children die. Families, people I've known for years. I've tried everything. Nothing works. We have new treatments, broad-spectrum antivirals designed for Cridian biology. They've been tested and refined over decades specifically for scenarios like this." Talk's large eyes widened. "Decades you've been preparing for this." "For 42 years, Strand said. Now show me your worst cases. We start with the children. We save as many as we can, and we work together to end this plague." Talk nodded slowly. Then he turned and led them deeper into the medical complex. To a children's ward that broke even Aldrich's carefully maintained composure. 50 small beds, 50 young Christians, all of them infected, all of them dying at different speeds. Some still conscious. Some already too far gone. Medical equipment jury-rigged and failing. Parents sitting vigil beside beds holding small hands whispering comfort in a language Aldrich didn't understand but recognized in the universal grammar of grief. "This is where we keep the critical pediatric cases," Talk said quietly. "Kira Vor is in bed 17. Sarana moved past them, ran to a bed in the corner where a small figure lay connected to machines that beeped their steady warning rhythms. Kira, 8 years old, gray skin, too pale. Breathing assisted by a ventilator because her lungs couldn't do the work alone anymore. Eyes closed, peaceful almost except for the tremors that shook her thin frame every few seconds. Sarana took her daughter's hand, looked at Dr. Strand with eyes that held the last fragments of hope. "Please," she said, "just that one word." But it carried the weight of every parent's desperate prayer. Strand knelt beside the bed, pulled out a medical scanner, ran it over Kira's small form reading the data that appeared on the screen. "How long has she been like this?" 6 days. She was singing last week. Now she can barely breathe. Strand studied the scanner readings. Then she looked up at her medical team. "We start here. Prepare Sentinel-7 protocol. Full dosage for pediatric Cridian physiology. And someone get me a complete blood work and tissue sample. I need to see exactly what this plague is doing at the cellular level." The human medical team moved with practiced efficiency. Equipment unpacked, portable labs set up, samples taken with gentle precision, while Sarana watched every movement with the intensity of a mother who'd already lost too much. Aldrich stepped back. Let the professionals work. He'd brought them here. Now they had to do what 42 years of preparation had trained them for. But before he could leave the ward, a small hand caught his sleeve. He looked down. Another child, maybe 9 or 10, male, eyes huge and dark and frightened. "Are you really here to help?" the boy asked in halting English. "They said humans are dangerous, that you eat children." Aldrich knelt down, brought himself to the child's eye level. "That's not true. We came here because children like you asked for help, and we never leave children behind." "Why?" Simple question, profound in its innocence. "Because," Aldrich said softly, "I had a son once. His name was Ethan. He was about your age. And when he needed help, no one came. I promised myself I'd never let that happen to another child if I could prevent it." The boy was quiet for a moment. Then he leaned forward and hugged Aldrich around the neck, small arms. Weak from sickness, but holding on with everything he had. Thank you for coming, the boy whispered. Thank you for not being like they said. Aldrich closed his eyes, hugging the child back, felt something that had been frozen in his chest for 20 years start to crack. When he stood up, Serana was watching him, understanding in her eyes. You lost someone, she said. Not a question. My son, 20 years ago, different war, same grief. And yet you came to save ours. Because Aldrich said his death doesn't make their lives worth less. It makes them worth more. Every child we save is a chance to prove that loss doesn't have to breed more loss, that we can be better than our worst moments. Dr. Strand's voice cut through the moment. Captain, we have preliminary results on the plague. You need to see this. Aldrich moved to where Strand stood over her portable lab equipment, data scrolling across the screen, genetic sequences, viral markers, information that meant nothing to him, but clearly meant something terrible to her. What am I looking at, doctor? This plague isn't natural, sir. It's been engineered, designed. Someone created this as a biological weapon, and it either escaped containment or was deliberately deployed. Silence in the ward. Even the machines seemed to pause their beeping. Talk's voice was barely a whisper. Engineered. You're certain. Completely certain. The genetic markers are too precise, too targeted. This pathogen was built to attack Cridian respiratory systems with maximum efficiency. It's horrifying work. Brilliant and monstrous. The Empire, Serana said, her voice hollow. 20 years ago, there were rumors. Bioweapon research in the outer territories. Tests on... She stopped, looked at the children in their beds. Tests on expendable colonies, she finished. Oh gods, they used us. They created this thing, and when it got loose, they just left us to die rather than admit what they'd done. Aldrich felt rage building in his chest. Cold, controlled. The kind of anger that didn't burn hot, but froze everything it touched. We can prove this. The genetic evidence is irrefutable, Strand said. This was deliberate creation. Whether it was meant to be deployed here or escaped accidentally, I can't say. But someone in the Christian Empire created a plague designed to kill their own people. And then abandoned them when it worked too well, Aldrich said. He activated his comm. Commander Rains, this is Hayes. I need you to transmit everything Dr. Strand just discovered to Admiral Vorinth. Priority Alpha. He needs to know what his government did here. Aye, sir. Transmitting now. Aldrich looked at Serana, at Talk, at the children lying in beds that had become tombs. We're going to save as many of them as we can, he said. And then we're going to make sure the people responsible answer for what they did. That's a promise. The Empire will deny everything, Talk said. They'll claim we're lying, that the humans fabricated the evidence. Then we'll make the evidence so overwhelming they can't deny it. But first we save lives, Dr. Strand. How soon can you begin treatments? Sentinel-7 is ready for deployment. We start with Kira and work our way through the critical cases. But sir, I need to be clear, this is experimental. We've tested it, but never in field conditions. There could be complications, side effects. We might lose patients. How many will we lose if we do nothing? All of them. Then we try. We save who we can, and we don't stop until the last patient is either cured or we've exhausted every option. Strand nodded, turned to her team. Prepare the first dose. Let's bring these children back from the edge. 3 hours later, Lisa Torres died trying to restore power to the hospital's critical care wing. She was 28, an engineering specialist, brilliant with power systems and electrical grids, volunteered for the hazardous repair work because she'd grown up in mining colonies and knew what it meant when infrastructure failed and people died because the machines stopped working. The plasma conduit she was repairing had been damaged in the early days of the plague, jury-rigged, back together, running at twice its safe capacity. It should have been replaced months ago, but there were no replacement parts and no ships coming with supplies. When it finally failed completely, the overload surge killed her instantly, along with a Cridian engineer named Rix, who'd been working alongside her. Two people from different species dying together, trying to keep the lights on so the doctors could see to save the children. Aldrich stood in the engineering bay and looked at the two bodies lying under emergency blankets, human and Cridian, dead for the same cause, united in sacrifice. Thorne Madsen stood beside him. The chief engineer's face was carved from stone. Lisa had been one of his best people. He'd trained her himself, watched her grow from a nervous ensign into a competent specialist. She knew the risks, sir, Madsen said, his voice rough. Told me the conduit was unstable. I ordered her to wait for proper safety protocols. She said there wasn't time. Children needed the power now. She was right, Aldrich said quietly. She was also dead, sir. Right doesn't matter when you're dead. It matters to the people she saved. Around them, human and Critian engineers worked together to install the replacement power systems, learning each other's languages, sharing technical knowledge, building trust across a divide that had separated them for generations. A young Christian female approached, Rix's apprentice, eyes red from crying. Captain Hayes, she said carefully, I wanted you to know, Rix died protecting Lisa. When the conduit exploded, he pushed her away, tried to save her. They both tried to save each other. Aldrich looked at the two bodies again, saw past the different skin tones and physiologies to the common truth beneath. People who'd chosen to risk everything to help strangers. The same choice he'd made when he crossed the border. We'll hold a memorial service, he said, both of them. Together. They deserve that recognition. The Empire doesn't usually honor. The Empire isn't here. We are. And we honor those who give their lives for others. That's not negotiable. The Christian engineer nodded slowly. Then she placed her hand over her heart in what Aldrich recognized as a gesture of respect. Thank you, Captain, for coming, for helping, for seeing us as people worth saving. She returned to her work. Madsen looked at Aldrich. 2 casualties now, sir, Miller and Torres. The crew is asking questions, wondering if this mission is worth the cost. And what do you tell them, Chief? I tell them to look at the children's ward, where Dr. Strand just stabilized 7 critical cases, where kids who were dying yesterday are breathing on their own today. I tell them Lisa would want us to finish what we started. You're right. She would. Aldrich activated his comm. All hands, this is the captain. Today we lost Engineer Torres in service to this colony. She died doing what she loved, fixing broken systems and keeping the lights on. She died alongside a Critian engineer named Rix, who tried to save her. They're both heroes. They both deserve our gratitude. He paused. We came here to save lives. We've lost 2 of our own doing exactly that. Dr. Miller, Engineer Torres. Good people. People with families waiting for them at home. They paid the price of mercy with their lives. And their sacrifice has bought time for 170,000 people who might live because we were here. Another pause. We have 69 hours left. We're going to use every second. We're going to save every life we can, and we're going to make sure Miller and Torres didn't die for nothing. That is all. He closed the channel. Looked one more time at the 2 bodies under their emergency blankets. Human and Christian, different species, same sacrifice. The price of mercy written in blood that didn't care about borders or treaties or old hatreds. Just people trying to help people, and dying for it. Aldrich walked back toward the medical facility where Dr. Strand was working miracles with 42 years of preparation and the desperate hope that science could beat death if you tried hard enough. Behind him, engineers from 2 species worked together to restore power. Above him, 40 Critian warships held position in orbit, and in the darkness beyond the planet, long-range sensors detected something new. A Critian battle group, 3 dreadnoughts, 50 support craft, incoming, estimated time to arrival 18 hours. Orders from High Command, destroy the human vessel. Sterilize the colony, erase the evidence. The real test was coming. And they had less time than anyone thought. Dr. Mira Strand had been awake for 36 hours straight when she made the breakthrough. Coffee didn't help anymore. Stimulants barely registered. She was running on something beyond biochemistry, now pure determination forged in the crucible of watching children die while she worked frantically to save them. The portable lab hummed in the corner of what had been a supply room before Covenant landed. Samples spinning in centrifuges. Genetic sequencers analyzing data. Computers running millions of simulations trying to find the one combination that would crack the plague's defenses. Sentinel-7 was working. Barely. It slowed the disease's progression. Bought time. Stabilized critical patients. But it wasn't a cure. It was a temporary reprieve. A stay of execution. And with a battle group incoming in less than 18 hours, temporary wouldn't be enough. Kira Vor was breathing on her own now. The ventilator disconnected after 48 hours of Sentinel-7 treatment. She could sit up, could speak in whispers, could hold her mother's hand without her fingers trembling from fever. But the plague was still there, lurking, waiting, ready to surge back the moment the antiviral concentration dropped below critical levels. 7 children had been saved from immediate death. 3 more had died despite everything Strand and her team could do, their bodies too damaged. The plague too advanced, science and compassion losing the race against time and biology. Each death carved something out of Strand's soul, But she kept working, because that's what doctors did. They worked until the problem was solved or there was nothing left to try. The computer chimed. Simulation 47, 219 complete. Results viable. Strand looked at the screen, blinked, read the data again because it couldn't be that simple, couldn't be that elegant. 42 years of preparation, and it came down to a modification so subtle, she'd almost missed it. Sentinel-7 attacked the plague's replication mechanism. Sentinel-9 would attack its genetic foundation. A retroviral modification that wouldn't just slow the disease, it would eradicate it at the cellular level. Rewrite the infected cell's DNA to reject the plague entirely. Turn the victim's own biology into the weapon that destroyed the invader. She ran the simulation again. Same result. Again, still viable. A fourth time because scientists didn't trust miracles until they'd beaten them to death with verification. Viable, viable, viable. Oh my God, Strand whispered. Oh my God, this could work. She activated her comm with shaking hands. Captain Hayes, this is Strand. I need you in the lab immediately. I think I've found it. I think I've found the cure. Aldrich had been in the children's ward when the call came, sitting with a young Christian boy who'd asked if humans ate children. The boy's name was Nix, 10 years old, infected but stable on Sentinel-7, reading a storybook in halting English while Aldrich helped with the difficult words. Simple moment. Quiet. The kind of peace that felt stolen from the chaos. He'd stood immediately when Strand called, seen the look in her eyes through the video feed. Hope and exhaustion and the manic energy of someone who'd pushed past human limits and found something extraordinary on the other side. Now he stood in the lab, reading data he only partially understood while Strand explained what she'd discovered with the rapid-fire precision of someone whose brain was moving faster than her mouth could follow. Sentinel-9 is a complete paradigm shift. We're not treating symptoms, we're editing the patient's cellular response at the genetic level. The plague can't survive if the host cells reject it at the fundamental DNA level. It's elegant, it's brilliant, it's exactly what we needed. How long to manufacture, Aldrich asked. That's the problem. With Covenant's medical fabrication systems working at maximum capacity, we can produce enough for maybe 2,000 doses in 72 hours. But we have 170,000 infected people. Aldrich felt his hope crumble. So we choose who lives and who dies. No, we start production immediately. We treat the most critical cases first, the children, the elderly, the ones who won't survive another week. And we send the manufacturing specs to Admiral Varenth. If the Critian fleet helps us produce Sentinel-9, we can save everyone. You want us to give them the cure to trust them. Strand met his eyes. We came here to save lives, Captain, not to hoard miracles. If Varenth is genuine about helping, this is how we find out. Aldrich was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. Begin production. I'll contact the Admiral. Varenth received the transmission in his ready room aboard the Valorous Resolve. 40 hours since the human ship had landed. 18 hours until the High Command battle group arrived with orders to erase everything. He'd spent those 40 hours watching human medical teams work themselves to exhaustion saving Cretan children. Watching human engineers die alongside Cretan colleagues trying to restore infrastructure. Watching Captain Hayes walk through the colony's streets, speaking with civilians, holding children, treating enemies like people who deserve dignity and care. It was breaking something in Varenth's carefully constructed worldview. 4 decades of certainty about human nature, about their aggression, their selfishness, their fundamental incompatibility with Cretan civilization. All of it collapsing under the weight of what he was witnessing. And now this, the human doctor offering to share a cure that could save an entire colony. No conditions, no demands, just a simple request for help, manufacturing enough doses to save everyone, given freely, to the people who'd killed the human doctor, who'd attacked their ship, who'd spent generations as their enemies. Varenth read the technical specifications. Elegant work. The kind of medicine that proved humans understood biology at levels the Empire rarely achieved. 42 years of research distilled into a treatment that could end the plague completely. Given freely. To people they had every reason to hate. Admiral, his communications officer said carefully, High Command is expecting a status report. They want to know why the human vessel is still operational. Tell them the situation is complex, that I'm monitoring for tactical advantage. Musha, sir, they specifically ordered. I know what they ordered, Varenth interrupted. Tell them I'm complying, and open a secure channel to Captain Hayes. The screen flickered. Hayes appeared looking as exhausted as Varenth felt. Admiral, thank you for taking my call. Dr. Strand's cure. Is it genuine? Completely. We're beginning production now, but we need help. Your manufacturing capabilities could produce enough doses to save every infected person on RT-7 within a week. And you're offering this technology freely. We're offering it because people are dying and we can save them. That's the only calculation that matters. Vorinth leaned forward. Captain Hayes, in 18 hours, a Creation battle group will arrive with orders to destroy your ship and sterilize this colony. They will not negotiate. They will not hesitate. They serve High Command, and High Command wants RT-7 erased because the truth of what happened here is more dangerous than any weapon. Then help us save these people before they arrive, please. The pleas carried weight, not begging, not desperation, just one officer asking another to make the right choice. If I commit my fleet's resources to manufacturing this cure, Vorinth said slowly, I will be disobeying direct orders. I will be choosing the lives of civilians over my duty to the Empire. I will likely face court-martial and execution. I know, I'm asking anyway. Asking, why should I trust you? Why should I believe this isn't some elaborate trap? Hayes was quiet for a moment. Then he reached off screen and brought something into view. A photograph. A young boy. Human. Dark hair. Gap-toothed smile. My son Ethan. Killed 20 years ago in a Cridian raid on Nova Station. He was 10 years old. He loved astronomy and terrible jokes and building models of spaceships he wanted to fly someday. Hayes set the photo down. I came here despite losing him. Not because of it. I came here because children like Kira deserve to grow up regardless of what species they are. And if I can save them, then Ethan's death means something more than just another casualty in a pointless war. He leaned closer to the camera. You can trust me because I'm not asking you to betray the Empire. I'm asking you to serve the best version of what the Empire should be. A civilization that protects its people. All of them. Even the ones politicians find inconvenient. Vorinth had closed his eyes, thought about 40 years of service. 40 years of certainty. 40 years of knowing exactly who the enemy was and what they represented. All of it wrong, not because humans were saints, but because they were capable of choosing compassion even when it cost them everything. And if they could make that choice, I will commit my fleet to manufacturing Sentinel-9, Vorinth said. We will produce enough doses for every infected person. And when the battle group arrives, I will explain my actions and accept the consequences. Thank you, Admiral. This is the right choice. The right choice, Vorinth said quietly, may still get us both killed. But I would rather die doing something worthy of honor than live serving leaders who abandon their own people. 12 hours before the battle group arrived, disaster struck again. Medic Jackson Cole was administering Sentinel-9 to a critical patient in the intensive care ward. 41 years old, father of 3 daughters back on Earth, 20 years in fleet medical, steady hands, calm voice. The kind of person patients trusted instinctively. The Christian patient was seizing, violent convulsions from the plague's final assault on the nervous system. Cole was trying to stabilize her, holding her down, while a Christian nurse named Lena prepared an emergency sedative. Neither of them saw the IV line disconnect. Neither of them noticed the contaminated fluid spray across Cole's exposed skin, where his protective suit had torn during the struggle. 3 hours later, Cole developed a fever. 6 hours later, he couldn't breathe without assistance. The plague didn't care about species barriers. The engineered pathogen had been designed for Cridians, but biology was adaptable, opportunistic, and Cole's immune system, already compromised from exhaustion, couldn't fight what hit him. Doctor. Strand worked frantically. Applied Sentinel-9 immediately. Maximum dosage. Everything they'd learned from treating Cridian patients. It wasn't enough. The human immune response was different. The cure that saved Cridians accelerated Cole's deterioration. His body rejected the treatment, started shutting down. Lena, the Christian nurse who'd been working with him, refused to leave his side. I should have seen the disconnected lines, she kept saying. I should have warned him. Not your fault, Cole whispered through the oxygen mask. Just bad luck. But 12 hours after exposure, his organs began failing. Lena held his hand, this human stranger who'd come across hostile space to save her people, dying now because he'd tried to help one of her patients. I'm sorry, she said, tears streaming down gray cheeks. I'm so sorry. Don't be. Cole's voice was barely audible. You people, you deserved help. I'd do it again. His vital signs flatlined at 0347 hours. Strand called the time of death. And then Lena, who'd been working 16-hour shifts for 3 months, who'd watched thousands die, who'd held children in her arms while they took their last breaths, finally broke. She collapsed beside Cole's body, weeping, saying over and over in Cretan and broken English that it wasn't fair, that he'd come to save them and died for it, that the galaxy was cruel and random, and good people suffered while the ones responsible never faced consequences. 6 hours later, Lena died, not from the plague, from a cerebral hemorrhage brought on by stress exhaustion and the kind of grief that breaks bodies from the inside out. She died holding Cole's hand. Two bodies, human and Cretan, joined in death as they'd been in service. Aldrich stood over them in the medical bay and felt something fracture inside his chest. 4 casualties now: Dr. Miller, Engineer Torres, Medic Cole, Nurse Lena. 4 people who'd crossed borders, literal or metaphorical, to help strangers. 4 deaths that proved compassion cost blood. "Captain," Strand said quietly, "the battle group will be here in 6 hours. We've produced enough Sentinel-9 for 70,000 doses. Admiral Vorinth's fleet is manufacturing another 100,000. We can save everyone if they give us time." "They won't give us time, Doctor. High Command wants this colony erased. They want us dead. They want every piece of evidence that proves they created this plague buried under orbital bombardment." "Then what do we do?" Aldrich looked at the 2 bodies one more time. "We finish what we started. We save everyone we can. And when that battle group arrives, we show them that some things are worth fighting for, even if we lose." The Cretan battle group dropped out of faster-than-light travel exactly on schedule. 3 dreadnoughts, each one massing 5 times Covenant's displacement, weapons that could crack a planet's crust, shields that could shrug off anything the human battlecruiser could throw at them. 50 support craft arrayed in perfect formation, and leading them, High Counselor Vex himself, politician, war hawk, the architect of the RT-7 quarantine, and the man who'd signed the order condemning 200,000 civilians to death. Vex's face appeared on every screen, human and Cretan orbiting RT-7. "This is High Counselor Vex of the Christian Imperial Command. The quarantine of RT-7 remains in effect. All vessels will withdraw immediately. The human ship will power down and prepare to be destroyed. Any resistance will be met with overwhelming force." He paused, let the threat sink in. "Admiral Vorinth, you have betrayed the Empire by assisting the human invaders. You are relieved of command and ordered to surrender your vessel. Refusal will result in your execution along with your crew." Vorinth stood on the bridge of valorous resolve and felt strangely calm. This was the moment, the choice that would define everything. Serve the order or serve the principle. Obey the command or do what was right. Counselor Vex, Vorinth said clearly, "I have reviewed the evidence. The plague on RT-7 was engineered in Imperial research facilities. It was either deployed here as a test or escape containment. Either way, the Empire is responsible for 30,000 deaths and counting." Silence on the channel. "You abandoned these people rather than admit what you'd done. You let them die to protect your political position. And when humans came to help, when they sacrificed their own people to save ours, you ordered their destruction." Vorinth stepped closer to the screen. "I will not obey that order, Counselor. I will not murder those who showed us what honor truly means. And I will not serve a government that treats its own citizens as expendable test subjects." "Then you have chosen treason, Admiral." "No, Counselor. I've chosen integrity. You should try it sometime." Vorinth cut the transmission, turned to his crew. "All hands, this is Admiral Vorinth. We face an impossible choice. Obey High Command and destroy innocent people, or stand with the humans and face certain death. I cannot order you to choose, but I can tell you what I'm choosing." He straightened his uniform. "I'm standing with Captain Hayes. I'm defending RT-7. And if I die doing it, at least I'll die for something worthy of the oath I swore 40 years ago to protect Cretan citizens. All of them, not just the politically convenient ones." Around the bridge, his crew looked at each other. Then one by one they returned to their stations. "Sir," his tactical officer said, "the fleet is with you. All ships reporting ready. We stand together." Vorinth felt his throat tighten. "Thank you, all of you." On Covenant's bridge, Aldrich watched the tactical display as Vorinth's fleet positioned themselves between the colony and the battle group. 15 ships against 53. Certain death. Noble, brave, futile. Kessler appeared at his side. "Sir, we have one option. Ghost Hammer Protocol. It's part of the Shepard package. An experimental weapon system that Admiral Garrett installed on all border patrol ships 42 years ago." "What kind of weapon?" "Gravitic pulse generator. It creates localized spatial distortions that can disable entire fleets. We'd wipe out that battle group in 30 seconds. Aldrich stared at the tactical display, at the three dreadnoughts, at the ships that could reduce Covenant to atoms with a single volley. One button, one command, and they'd win. What are the side effects? Kessler hesitated. It's not precise, sir. The pulse would dissolve the battle group. It would also likely kill everyone aboard those ships. 70,000 Cretans dead in an instant. 70,000. Yes, sir. Aldrich looked at Ethan's photo on his console, at the gap-toothed smile of a boy who'd never grown up, who died because someone had made a calculation that his life was expendable in service to a political goal. The same calculation Vex had made about RT-7. The same calculation Aldrich could make right now about that battle group. Sir, Kessler said urgently, they're charging weapons. If we're going to use Ghost Hammer, it has to be now. Aldrich closed his eyes, thought about Miller and Torres and Cole dying to save Critian lives, thought about Lena dying from grief because a human medic had shown her what compassion looked like, thought about Voran choosing integrity over orders, thought about everything that had led to this moment, and made his choice. No, Ben. Sir, we don't use Ghost Hammer. We don't kill 70,000 people to save ourselves. That's not who we are. That's not what we came here to do. Captain, they will destroy us. Maybe, but we won't become monsters to survive. We won't prove Vex right about humanity. We stand down. We trust that doing the right thing matters even if we don't live to see the outcome. He activated the shipwide comm. All hands, this is Captain Hayes. The battle group has orders to destroy us. We have the capability to stop them. But using that capability would mean killing 70,000 Cretans. Innocent crew members following orders. We won't do that. Pause. We came here to save lives, not take them. That principle doesn't change because we're facing death ourselves. So we stand down, we hold position, and we trust that the example we've set, that Admiral Vorenth and his fleet have set, will matter. Another pause. It has been my honor to serve with all of you. And if this is where our story ends, at least we end it doing what we came here to do, helping people who needed us. Hayes out. He sat back in his command chair, watched the battle group advance, watched Vorenth's fleet position themselves between Covenant and destruction. 15 ships against 53, waiting for the inevitable. And then, something extraordinary happened. 2 of the dreadnoughts powered down their weapons, then 4 of the support craft, then 8 more, then 20. On Vex's flagship, a mutiny was occurring, captains refusing to fire on Vorenth's fleet, crew members abandoning their stations, officers broadcasting Vorenth's speech to their own ships and watching as their personnel chose honor over orders. The recordings of humans dying to save Cretans had been transmitted throughout the fleet. Miller's file showing his daughter's letters, Torres working alongside Rix to restore power, Cole holding a Cretan patient's hand while she seized, Lena weeping over his body. 4 deaths. 4 examples of what compassion looked like when it cost everything, and 70,000 Christian military personnel watching, listening, deciding what they believed. Half the battle group refused to fire. Vex's voice screamed over every channel. This is treason. You are all traitors to the Empire. Fire on the human ship. That is a direct order. But the only ship that fired was his own. 1 dreadnought against Covenant. The plasma bolt streaked through space, and Vorenth's flagship intercepted it, shields flaring, taking the hit meant for the humans. Admiral, his tactical officer shouted, shields at 40%. We can't take another hit like that. Vorenth smiled. Then let's make sure we don't have to. He opened a channel to every ship in the system, every human vessel, every Critian craft, every monitoring station within 3 light years. High Counselor Vex, you stand alone. Your own fleet refuses to murder those who showed us what honor truly means. You created a plague that killed 30,000 Cretans. You abandoned RT-7 to hide your crime. And now you would destroy everyone who knows the truth. He stood up. I hereby place you under arrest for crimes against the Empire, for war crimes, for the mass murder of Imperial citizens. You will face trial, and the galaxy will know what you did. Vex's face contorted with rage. You have no authority to arrest me, Admiral. I am the High Council. I am the law. No counselor, you were the law. Now you're just a war criminal. 20 ships surrounded Vex's dreadnought, human and Christian together, a fleet united not by politics but by principle. Vex tried to run. His engines flared. Vorenth's weapons disabled them with surgical precision. Dead in space, powerless. Defeated not by force but by the crew that refused to follow him into darkness. The battle was over. Not with violence, with choice. 7 days later, RT-7 was transformed. 170,000 people cured, the plague eradicated. Sentinel-9 working exactly as Dr. Strand had designed it. No more death wards. No more children struggling to breathe. No more families choosing which loved one to sit with because they couldn't be everywhere at once. Just a colony returning to life. Slowly, painfully, but inevitably. In the colony's central square, a memorial service brought together two species that had been enemies for generations. 6 names carved in stone, 3 human, 3 Cridian: Dr. Wyatt Miller, Engineer Lisa Torres, Medic Jackson Cole, Nurse Lena, Engineer Ricks, Dr. Valen Tok. Tok had died 3 days after the cure's deployment. His body, pushed beyond all human limits for 90 days, finally gave out. He'd worked 72 hours straight, administering Sentinel-9 to every patient he'd watched suffer for months. On the 4th day, with the last dose delivered and the last child declared cured, he sat down in his office chair, closed his eyes for what he thought would be a moment's rest, and never woke up. His heart, exhausted beyond recovery, simply stopped. They found him with a smile on his face, the smile of a man who'd finally saved his patients. Aldrich stood before the memorial, read each name aloud, told the crowd what each person had done, what they'd sacrificed, why they mattered. Saranatal spoke next, her daughter Kira beside her. Healthy now, color returned to her gray skin, eyes bright. These people came when no one else would, Sarana said. They didn't ask what we could give them. They didn't demand payment or political concessions. They just helped. And some of them died doing it. She looked at Aldrich. Captain Hayes told me his son died 20 years ago, that he came here despite that loss, because he understood that grief shouldn't breed more grief, that the right response to pain is compassion, not revenge. Kira stepped forward, placed a flower at the base of the memorial. Then she walked to Aldrich, looked up at him with those large, dark eyes. "Thank you for saving me," she said in careful English. "Thank you for not leaving us." Aldrich knelt down, brought himself to her level. "Thank you for holding on long enough for us to reach you, and for singing that lullaby. That's what brought us here. Your voice was, will you come back to visit? If I'm welcome, yes. You'll always be welcome," Sarana said. "All of you, forever." The ceremony ended with silence. 2 minutes where hundreds stood together and remembered what had been lost and what had been saved. Then life resumed, normal and precious and bought with blood. Aldrich's court-martial lasted 3 weeks. Earth Command wanted his head, wanted to make an example, wanted to show the fleet that you couldn't just violate every regulation and expect mercy. But the evidence was overwhelming. The recordings from RT-7, the testimony from Voranth and his fleet, the files on Shepard Protocol that proved Aldrich had been following a plan 42 years in the making. The public opinion that turned Aldrich into a hero and made Earth Command look like heartless bureaucrats. In the end, they gave him a formal reprimand for the file, and humanity's highest honor for what actually mattered, the Medal of Distinguished Service, presented by Earth Command Admiral Victoria Hayes herself, who admitted privately that she'd have done exactly the same thing. "You started something, Captain," she told him after the ceremony. "Humans and Christians working together, saving each other. The galaxy is watching, and we can't go back to the way things were." "Good," Aldrich said. "The way things were cost too many lives." He retired from active service 6 months later. Bought a small house in Montana, mountains and quiet and space to breathe. Tried to figure out what came next when your life's purpose had been fulfilled, and you were only 55 years old with potentially decades ahead. The answer came 7 years after RT-7. Aldrich was working in his garden when the transport landed. He looked up, shading his eyes against the afternoon sun. Watched a young woman emerge. Tall, gray skin, large dark eyes, wearing an Earth Fleet Academy uniform. It took him a moment to recognize her. Kira, 15 years old now, no longer the dying child in a hospital bed. Healthy, strong, confident. She walked up the path to where he stood, dirt on his hands, surprised and pleased and confused all at once. "Captain Hayes," she said. "Not Captain anymore, just Aldrich." "Sir, I wanted to find you to tell you something." She stood at attention, formal, precise. "I'm joining the fleet. Earth Defense Academy accepted my application. I'm going to be a medical officer. Like Dr. Strand, I'm going to help people." Aldrich felt his throat tighten. "Kira, that's wonderful. Your mother must be proud." "She is. but I wanted to tell you personally because you're the reason I'm alive. You and your crew. You came when no one else would. You saved me, saved all of us." She stepped closer. "I don't remember much from when I was sick, but I remember your voice. You came to the children's ward. You read to one of the other kids. You were kind, and I remember thinking, if humans can be this kind, then maybe the galaxy is worth believing in. I was just doing what needed to be done." "No, sir, you were doing what most people wouldn't, and now I want to do the same. I want to be someone who helps when others won't, who crosses borders to save strangers, who proves that compassion matters more than fear." She handed him something, a photograph. Her graduating class at the academy, 40 faces, 24 human, 16 Christian, different species, one uniform, together. "This is the future you helped create," Kira said. "A galaxy where we work together instead of killing each other, where we save lives instead of taking them, where children like me grow up to be officers like you." Aldrich looked at the photo, at the young faces filled with hope and determination, at the proof that sacrifice could change the world if you were willing to pay the price. "Thank you for showing me," he said quietly. "And Kira, you're going to be a great officer, better than I was." "I hope so, sir, but I'll always try to be the kind of officer you taught me was possible, the kind who chooses compassion every time." She saluted, formal and perfect. Aldrich returned it, and when she left flying back to the academy and her future, he stood in his garden and thought about everything that had led to this moment. Miller and Torres and Cole dying to save strangers. Lena and Rickson talk giving everything to help people they'd been taught to hate. Vorn, the choosing integrity over orders. And one little girl who'd held on long enough for mercy to arrive. 42 years of preparation, 6 casualties paid in blood, 170,000 lives saved, and a generation of children growing up knowing that compassion was stronger than fear. The mathematics of sacrifice, the price of mercy, the promise kept. Aldrich went back to his garden, planted seeds that would bloom next spring, thought about building something that grew instead of destroying things that stood in the way. 20 years ago, he'd lost his son to hatred. 7 years ago, he'd saved someone else's daughter with compassion. And now that daughter was joining the fleet to continue what he'd started. The cycle wasn't broken, but it was bending towards something better, toward a galaxy where species helped each other instead of killing each other, where children like Kira could grow up safe because people like Miller and Torres and Cole had been willing to die for them, where the price of mercy was steep but worth paying. Every time. Always. The sun set over the Montana mountains. Aldrich finished his work, went inside, looked at the photo Kira had given him one more time. 24 human faces, 16 Cridian faces, one future, together. And in the darkness of space on a colony renamed Shepherd's Hope, 280,000 souls lived and worked and built a civilization that proved borders were just lines on maps. That compassion recognized no boundaries. That mercy, even when it cost everything, was always worth the price. Always. The promise had been kept, the protocol fulfilled, and the legacy. The legacy was just beginning.